Evening, chaps and chapettes. This is the first sort of real video of getting into the meat and bones of my upcoming project about Assaye in 1803. And like I think a few people are doing at the moment, I'm going to try and get a bit of history in there whilst I'm doing the models as well, just to make things a bit more interesting and sort of take you on the journey as I learn about this as well. Now, at the minute, I don't have any painted figures. I'm finishing off a few projects before I get my teeth into this, just so that I can really have some fun doing it and not worry about other stuff I'm doing. So, although I've got the metal, and I'll show you the figures in a bit, I thought I'd start off just by going back to the start and just going through the history briefly of the Governor and Company of Merchants of London trading into the East Indies, or as it's more commonly called, the East India Company, as they were sort of one of the major players within India at the time that we'll be looking at. So going right the way back to the start, it sort of starts in 1588 following the defeat of the Spanish Armada. The captured Spanish and Portuguese ships enabled our English voyagers to sort of look at seeing the world, because at this point it was the biggest navy. The London merchants, or some London merchants I should say, did present a petition to Queen Elizabeth I for permission to sail within the Indian Ocean, requiring the royal permit to do so, and she granted that permission in 1591. Flash forward 8 years later, in September, a group of merchants met together and stated their intention to venture in the pretended voyage to the East Indies, which it may please the Lord to prosper, and the sums that they will adventure. And they committed round about what would be £4 million worth of money to this venture. The adventurers, as they became known, decided to apply to the Queen to get this royal charter for it, although they were initially unsuccessful. However, a year later, in 1600, they were successful when they petitioned the Queen for a charter, and she granted the royal charter to the Earl of Cumberland, 250 knights, aldermen and burgesses, under the name of the Governor and Company of the Merchants of London trading into the East Indies. And that went on to become the East India Company, or as it's sometimes just known, the Company. And going forth in this video, I'm just going to refer to it as the Company, because that's a hell of a mouthful to say. So, this company was formed to trade in the Indian Ocean region, initially in the East Indies, so that's the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia, but then later went on to operate in Qing, China, and also on into Hong Kong following the Opiate Wars. So they rose to account for about half the world's trade at their height. So in the entire world, 50% of the trade was being done by the East India Company. And they were looking at things like cotton, silk, dye, salt, spice, saltpeter, which of course is a very important component in gunpowder, tea, and opium. And it all sort of really started to their presence as a monopoly started really at about 1612, so about 12 years after their charter was created, at something called the Battle of Swali, I think that's pronounced right, where they defeated the Portuguese in Surat. And the company then decided to explore whether or not they could actually have a proper foothold on the subcontinent at that point, with a sanction from Britain and the ruling Mughal Empire at the time. And they requested that a diplomatic mission was launched to that to try to take over. So James I, who of course succeeded Elizabeth, instructed Sir Thomas Roe to visit the Mughal Emperor, and I'm going to try to pronounce this, Nur-ud-din Salim Jahangir, to arrange a commercial treaty that would give the company exclusive rights to trade in Surat and around the other areas, and he was successful in that. So the company established trading posts in Surat in 1619, Madras in 1639, Bombay in 1668, and then Calcutta in 1690. So by 1647, the company had 23 factories, each under the command of a master merchant or governor, and they became the walled forts that became Fort William, Fort St George, and Bombay Castle. So, when you're building a castle, you're actually stating your intent you're staying, aren't you? Look at the Normans. So, obviously that, we didn't just go around sailing around doing this by ourselves. The East India Company had fierce competition between the Dutch, who also had a large navy. Following Napoleonic history, we went to try to capture that later on, and the French navy. And it was all fought over the Spice Islands, because spices are very expensive. Well, certainly some spices are very expensive. And some of them could get you a 400% increase in profit. And when you're a trading company, that's what you're looking for, profits. So those forts were being fought. And between 1652 and 1784, there are at least 4 Dutch Anglo wars going on in the area to try to get control of them. King Charles II, so again we're flitting forward in time here. Charles II granted the company the rights to autonomous territorial acquisitions, to mint their own money, to command fortresses, troops, and make alliances militarily, to declare war and to make peace, and to exercise criminal and civil jurisdiction over the areas in which they were ruling. So they basically made them a sovereign country in their own right in that sense. And in 1689, a Mughal fleet commanded by Sidi Yaqub attacked Bombay. A year after resistance, the East India Company surrendered, and the company sent envoys to plead for a pardon. The envoys reportedly were made to prostrate themselves before the emperor, pay a large amount of money out, and promise that they were going to have better behaviour in the future. The emperor withdrew his troops, and then the East India Company went and set up base in Bombay. During the first century of the company's existence in India, most people lived under regional kings or nawabs, and by the late 18th century, many of the Mughals were weak in comparison to the company, as it took over the cities, modernised by building roads, bridges, and railways. And the increasingly large territory the company was annexing and collecting taxes from, sort of basically caused a dual administration. Between 1765 and 1772, Robert Clive of India, gave responsibility of tax collecting to the Indian deputies and judicial responsibilities to the Indians as well. Let me scroll down. Which carried on until 1772, where Warren Hastings, who had been in India for a long time, became the first Governor General to manage and overview all of the annexed lands, and that he brought that dual administrations type scheme to a close. He, however, had learned Urdu and Persian and took a great interest in preserving the ancient Sanskrit in manuscripts that were found, and he translated them into English. He used Sanskrit texts for Hindu people and Arabic texts for Muslim people, and it's something that's still used within the Pakistani and Bangladeshi courts today, so there's a lasting impact there of his rule. However, his enemies in London used his self-enrichment by the annexation of land to have him impeached and removed from office. He was replaced by Charles Cornwallis, yes, the one that's surrendered to George Washington, and he was very distrustful of Indians and replaced most of them with Britons. He introduced a system of personal land ownership for the Indians, which caused a lot of conflict as the illiterate people had no idea why they were suddenly becoming renters and not owning their own land, which forced the Mughals, the Maharathas, and other local rulers to either choose to fight the company, and where they would lose everything, or to cooperate with them, where they'd receive a big payout but still lose their lands. Technically, I think that's called a lose-lose situation, which, of course, doesn't breed goodwill. So the East India Company gradually took over most of the land by threat, intimidation, bribery, or outright war. And we'll have a look at that a bit more in later videos. However, once they took over Bengal in the Treaty of Allahabad in 1765, it started using its taxes to fund its expansion into other areas of India, and didn't have to rely on capital from London, which of course gave it much more autonomy. So the company ruled India effectively from 1757 at the Battle of Plassey and lasted until 1858, when the Indian Rebellion took place, and the Government Act of India in 1858 led to the British Crown resuming direct control of the subcontinent and forming the British Raj. The company was dissolved in 1874, as the Government Act of India had then rendered it powerless and obsolete. So the East India Company is one of the most powerful and enduring organisations in history, and has had a long-lasting impact on the Indian subcontinent, with both positive and harmful effects. Although it was dissolved in 1874, it stimulated growth of the British Empire by providing all that money to the country. Its professionally trained armies rose to dominate the subcontinent, and was to become the armies of British India once they left, so they remained a standing army. And it helped to introduce English as an official language to the continent. So the history of the subcontinent of India is shaped and changed by the presence of the company within the subcontinent. So it's very important part of history, really, I think, and it's certainly something I'm finding interesting to read, and shocked in some places as well. So just a couple of little bits of trivia to add on the end here. So the East India Company was the first company to record the Chinese usage of orange-flavoured tea, which led to the development of Earl Grey. And they also introduced a system of merit-based appointment, which became the model for both the British and Indian civil service. So, the company basically invented the civil service. So they did end up seizing large parts of the Indian subcontinent, and as we'll see, that sort of large bits of that took place during the period of time that I will be looking at, and that really starts when Richard Wellesley, the brother of Arthur, the future Lord Wellington, arrives in the continent and becomes the Governor General, and we'll be looking at that a bit more as we go forward in history, forward in the videos. But what you're really here for, I suppose, is models, and I've got my little box here of figures. So all of these are from irregular miniatures, and as you can see, there's a lot of metal work, and I'll just get them out. Sorry about that, I was just getting them out of the box. So let's have a quick look at some of the figures. So these are Indian sepoys, which you can't really see very well in this bare metal, but got those guys. And there's, as you can see, a lot of them. 15 stands of basic and 5 stands of command. So each infantry stand will have 3 infantry, 1 command, and they will be going on these bases. The bases are from war bases. Then what have we got here? This is native cavalry. So this is not the irregular cavalry, this is the regular cavalry, who have sabres and rather smart uniforms. So there's those guys, and they also have here so this is one of the King's regiments. So far it's been company regiments, but this is one of the King's regiments. This is the 19th Dragoons. So at this point they were their Toltons. This is before they changed to Shakos. And all the cavalry will be on these bases. As I said, I'm singular basing these guys. And then we've got artillery. Where's the actual gun itself? Oh, come here. Teeny tiny cannon. So that sort of goes on there. And these ones are foot artillery. So they have oxen pulling the limbers, which is kind of cool. And then here is the horse artillery with horses. Oh no, that's a different type of... Here's the horse artillery, sorry. And then lastly, we got the Highlanders. Which you saw, and if I can just get him out. Here we go. So Arthur himself. So there you go. And I got bases for the artillery as well. So that's the British forces there for the battle. As I said, as I paint figures up, I'll go over a little bit of history for each of them where I can, and sort of looking at this as it develops. So you guys have a good one, and I'll see you in the next video.